He was actually caught by members of the community who spotted him trying to flee. Hello friends, happy Monday, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be talking about the case of Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, a man who terrorized Southern California. Let's get into it. Richard Ramirez was born on February 20th, 1960 to Mexican immigrant parents. He did not have a very stable childhood. His household was very unhealthy and he was terrified of his father. And because of this, he looked up to his older cousin, Miguel Ramirez, who was also known as Mike. Now, Mike was a veteran. He served in Vietnam, and he did some terrible things over there. He would tell Richard all these stories about how he would abuse Vietnam women. He showed Richard pictures of him doing this. He even showed Richard a picture of him holding a severed head. At one point, Mike and his wife get into a heated argument in front of Richard, and Mike shoots his wife in the face in front of Richard Ramirez. Mike does end up going to trial, but he gets sent to a mental institution and is eventually found not guilty by reason of insanity and is eventually released. Richard then moves in with his sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. Now, Roberto is a peeping Tom, and he starts taking Richard with him out on his late night adventures. Richard starts going down a very twisted path. He starts becoming a Satan worshiper. He starts becoming very brutal, and he starts idolizing this brutality and abuse. Richard gets a job at Holiday Inn where he begins trying to break into guest room to steal from them. He even attempts to rape one guest. He then moves to California in 1982. April 10th is the first suspected murder of Richard Ramirez, and that is of 9-year-old Mei Leung, and she was found in the basement of the hotel that Richard was living in at the time. She was stabbed, beaten, raped, and eventually her body was hung from a metal pipe. It was years later that DNA of Richard was connected to DNA of that crime. They also believe there could have possibly been another suspect at the time, but they don't know for sure. June 28th, 1984, Richard commits his first murder in LA. Richard murders 79-year-old Jenny Van Cow in her apartment. Her son finds her and she is beaten. She is severely wounded. She's nearly decapitated. Her dress is pulled up and there's blood everywhere. 6 months after this, Richard is arrested for a car theft where he spends 36 days in prison. March 17th, 1985, Richard shoots Maria Hernandez in the face outside of her home in Rosemead, California. She does survive, but her roommate Dale Yoshi dies from a shot to the head. Hours later, he shoots Cylon Yu, also known as Veronica Yu, in Montgomery Park. March 27th, 1985, Richard breaks into the home of Vincent Charles Azara, who is 64, and shoots him in the head while he's sleeping. His 44-year-old wife, Maxine, is beat, shot 3 times, stabbed, and had her eyes gouged out, and then placed in a jewelry box. Richard leaves a footprint in their flower beds, and the bullets found at the scene match the bullets of the other crime scenes. On May 14th, 1985, Richard breaks into the home of Bill and Lillian Doy in Monterey Park. He shoots Bill in the face and then he beats and rapes Lillian. On May 29th, 1985, Richard drives a stolen car to Monrovia where he then breaks into Mabel Bell and Florence Lang's house. Richard ties both of them up and attacks Lang with a hammer and then proceeds to beat and rape Bell. He also uses her lipstick to draw a pentagram on her body and on the walls of both of their bedrooms. Bell does later pass away due to her injuries. On May 30th, 1985, he breaks into Carol Kyle's home in Burbank, California. He ties her and her 11-year-old son up, and he beats and rapes her and then ties her son to her and flees. On July 2nd, 1985, he breaks into Mary Louise Cannon's house in Arcadia. He knocks her out with a lamp, and he uses one of her kitchen knives to stab her. On July 5th, 1985, Richard attacks 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron in Sierra Madre, California. He also tried to strangle her with a telephone cord, but the cord ended up sparking, which allowed her to breathe, and Richard believed then that Jesus was trying to save her, and he fled, and she was able to survive. On July 7th, 1985, he breaks into Joyce Lucille Nelson's home in Monterey Park, and he beats her and leaves a shoe print on her face. He then goes to Sophie Dickman's house where he ties her up, beats her, tries to rape her, and he steals her jewelry. He forces her to swear on Satan that there is no more valuables in the house. On July 20th, 1985, Richard buys a machete and drives a different stolen vehicle to Glendale, California, where he breaks into Leela and Maxon Meeting's house where he burglarizes and kills them. Richard then drives to Sun Valley and breaks into the Coronats' home. He shoots China wrong and he ties up and rapes Somkid. He also ties up their 8-year-old son and tells Somkid to swear to Satan that there's no more valuables in the house. On August 6, 1985, he breaks into Chris and Virginia Peterson's house. He shoots Virginia in the face and Chris in the neck, and both end up surviving. On August 8, 1985, he breaks into the home of Elias and Sakina Applewath. He shoots Elias while they're sleeping, ties up their 3-year-old son, and beats and handcuffs and rapes Sakina, demanding for her to give him jewelry. On August 18, 1985, he moves on to the San Francisco Bay Area where he goes to the home of Peter and Barbara Pan's house. He shoots Peter in the head and beats and rapes Barbara, and he uses lipstick to write on the wall the words, "Jack the Knife." On August 25, 1985, he breaks into the house of Bill Karn and Inez Erickson. He shoots Karn 3 times in the head and tells Erickson that he is the Night Stalker. He rapes her and tells her that she must swear to love Satan, and he tells her to tell the authorities that the Night Stalker was there. Officials got a description and a lead on the car he was driving, which was a stolen orange Toyota. They eventually find the car, and there is a fingerprint on the mirror that matches Richard Ramirez, and they release his mugshot. His mugshot gets released to the public, and Richard Ramirez, after taking a bus back to California, sees his face plastered on a newspaper and tries to run away. Luckily, a group of bystanders saw him and recognized him, and they attacked him and pinned him down until the authorities could get there. On September 20th, 1989, Richard Ramirez is convicted on 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. He is sentenced to 19 death penalties. At one point during court, he holds up his hand, which has a pentagram symbol on it, and he yells, "Hail Satan." Richard Ramirez had a lot of fans and female admirers, just like Ted Bundy. They would look up to him, they would appreciate him because of how handsome he was, and in 1988 he actually got married to one of his fans, someone who had written him at least 75 letters, and they got married in his prison. On June 7, 2013, after being on death row for 23 years, Richard Ramirez passes away at the age of 53 due to health complications. That wraps up the case of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. That case is a crazy one because it took them a while to even connect all the crimes because he had a lot of different victims. He used a lot of different weapons. He didn't have one true MO. Now, let me know in the comments what you guys think and what other cases you want to see. As always, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, friends.